Around 1900, what we call the Old West was very different from the movies. Gunfights, gold fever, land wars, and a whole lot of stories swept under the rug. In this series, we're going to dig into overlooked archives, listen to experts, and tell 23 episodes that show who really ran the frontier, what was at stake, and why so much stayed hidden for so long, far from the public eye. Number 1. The agency that hunted outlaws. In the mid-19th century, a Scottish immigrant named Alan Pinkerton set up something in Chicago that sounded more like a movie plot than real life. A private company dedicated entirely to hunting criminals. Instead of relying on small-town sheriffs, banks and railroads started hiring these guys to protect money, convoys, and important people. They made sketches of outlaws, kept detailed files, cross-checked information, and rode trains across the country chasing entire gangs. Their fame grew when they began tracking people like Jesse James and the James Younger Gang, who ended up living in hiding, always looking over their shoulders. Years later, the Pinkertons were also used to watch striking workers and protect big businessmen, earning respect from many and deep suspicion from a good part of the country. Their symbol was an open eye with the phrase, "We never sleep," a warning that for criminals there was no rest and no safe place. Number 2. The strange gold and diamond scam. In 1872, after the peak of the gold rush, two men from Kentucky, Philip Arnold and John Slack, claimed they had stumbled onto a lost field of precious stones in the American West, near the border of Colorado and Wyoming. They swore the ground there practically grew diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. The story spread fast among the big players, East Coast bankers, politicians, and mining veterans, everyone afraid of missing out on the deal of the century. To convince potential partners, Arnold and Slack took groups out to a remote patch of land, let each person dig a little, and, almost like magic, glittering stones would appear in the dirt. The trick was simple and brutal. Before the visits, they salted the ground with gems they had bought in London and San Francisco, mixing everything into the soil. It worked until they brought in a rising geologist, Clarence King. Suspicious, he examined the stones carefully and realized they came from different sources. There was no way they all naturally belonged in that one spot. When King presented his report, the whole house of cards collapsed. Many investors were left broke, along with a lesson that still holds up today. When someone promises easy riches, chances are somebody's being taken for a ride. Number 3. Bass Reeves, the real man behind the Lone Ranger. Bass Reeves was born enslaved and, while still young, escaped during the Civil War after fighting with his owner. He fled to Indian Territory, today's Oklahoma, where he lived among the tribes, learning their languages, hunting, and moving through the wilderness. After the war, this former slave became a U.S. deputy marshal, basically a federal lawman, responsible for a massive area west of the Mississippi. Working out of Fort Smith under Judge Isaac Parker, Reeves earned a reputation as a no-nonsense man. He didn't drink on duty, didn't take bribes, and had deadly accurate aim. Over his career, he put more than 3,000 criminals behind bars. Because of his fast horse, his quiet habit of appearing out of nowhere, and his dangerous missions, many people believe he was the inspiration for the Lone Ranger, even though there's no official proof. Number 4. Calamity. Jane, the woman who defied the West. Born into a poor family, Martha Jane Canary grew up in a pioneer wagon and was soon orphaned, pushed into doing a bit of everything, driving stagecoaches, working as a camp cook, scouting for troops, and even delivering messages through hostile territory. Along the westward expansion trail, she drank too much, cursed like a soldier, and wore men's clothes, something that shocked many people of her time. In Deadwood, her name became linked to Wild Bill Hickok, and from then on, truth and saloon talk blended into one. Some swore she saved travelers and soldiers from ambushes. Others said she made up her own stories to secure food, whiskey, and attention. To this day, it's hard to separate the real woman from the character the public helped create. Number 5. The Colorado Cannibal. Alfred Packer was a guide who tried to make a living in the Old West and ended up becoming a legend for the worst possible reasons. In the winter of 1874, he joined 5 men to cross the Rocky Mountains in search of money and a fresh start, even though the region was treacherous. Heavy snow, brutal cold, and almost no shelter. Months later, Packer showed up alone in a small frontier town, looking far too well-fed for someone who claimed to have been starving and carrying the weapons and belongings of his companions. When the sheriff started pressing him, his story changed with every interrogation, like one of those bar tales where you can tell something's being left out. Years later, hunters found scattered bones and traces of a campsite showing violent death and clear signs of cannibalism. Packer swore he only killed in self-defense and ate human flesh so he wouldn't freeze to death, but the jury didn't buy it. Convicted, he became an example of just how far a man might go when he's lost, scared, and completely alone in the snow. Number 6. The first big train robbery. In 1866, on a dark stretch of railroad in Indiana, an Ohio and Mississippi train was rolling by loaded with cargo and cash when brothers John and Simeon Reno decided to change the game. They weren't saloon gunslingers. They were cold, methodical men who spent weeks noting schedules, watching guards, and picking the perfect spot to stop the train. When the engineer saw the armed men on the tracks, it was already too late. The train was halted, the safe was cracked open, and about $13,000 vanished into the night. What would be a small fortune today? The news spread across the country, and people quickly realized that the rails, built to connect towns and businesses, could also be a fast road into crime. Years later, names like Jesse James would follow that path, turning train robbery into a trademark of the Old West. Number 7. Johnson County War. In 1892, in northern Wyoming, big cattle barons decided to settle scores with small ranchers who grazed on the same land. They called the conflict the Johnson County War, but in practice it was a planned hunt. Wealthy ranchers drew up a list of supposed cattle rustlers, hired gunmen from other states, and set out on an armed expedition like a private army. Small homesteads were surrounded, fences torn down, and men executed in front of their families. When the situation spun completely out of control, the federal government sent in troops to stop an even bigger bloodbath. Less famous than the OK Corral, this episode shows just how far abuse of power can go when money, local politics, and weak law mix together in remote country. Number 8. The invention of barbed wire. In the early 1870s, the Great American Plains were almost completely unfenced, and cattle roamed freely, mixing from one ranch to another. For the average rancher, that meant losses and fights with powerful neighbors. In 1874, Illinois farmer Joseph Glidden patented a simple wire with twisted metal barbs, barbed wire. Suddenly it became cheap to mark property lines, keep herds contained, and keep strangers out. The old long-distance cattle drives stopped making sense. Many cowboys lost their jobs, and the map of the West changed forever, cut by iron lines on every horizon, as entire families learned to live with rigid boundaries where there had once been nothing but open range. Number 9. Belle Starr, the Bandit Queen. Belle Starr, born Myra Maybelle Shirley, came from a Southern family shaped by the Civil War. In her youth, she spent time around Jesse and Frank James and learned early on that law and justice didn't always walk together. Later, when she partnered with the Cherokee Sam Starr, she fully entered the world of horse theft, outlaw hideouts, and handshake deals. In accounts from the time, she appears as a strong rider, tough talker, and someone who always kept a revolver close. She didn't lead big gangs, but she used her connections to negotiate, protect allies, and take her share. In 1889, she was killed in an ambush on a dirt road. No one was ever convicted. The unsolved murder, combined with her life between two worlds, the white world and the indigenous nations, helped turn Belle Starr into a symbol of a West where everyone had to decide whose side they were on. Number 10. Stagecoach Mary, the woman who delivered the mail. At the tail end of the Old West, around 1895, a middle-aged black woman became a legend on the frozen roads of Montana. Mary Fields, known to everyone as Stagecoach Mary. While many men thought twice before taking the mail route, she drove the stagecoach with a rifle by her side, a revolver on her hip, and a load of letters that had to make it to their destination by the end of the day. She faced blizzards, bandits, wolves, and frozen rivers as just part of the job, without complaint. In an America still marked by harsh racism and little patience for independent women, Mary earned respect through hard work, courage, and pure stubbornness. Every delivery she made proved that the U.S. mail could rely on someone almost nobody took seriously at first. Number 11. The Ghosts of Bodie. At the end of the 19th century, Bodie in California was your typical Old West gold town. Mine noise, packed saloons, high-stakes gambling, street fights, and people arriving from everywhere chasing quick money. When the gold started running out and a few fires swept through the town, almost everyone left in a hurry, leaving furniture, bottles, machines, and even toys right where they were. Today, the houses are still standing, only empty, as if everyone walked out yesterday. Visitors talk about footsteps in closed hallways, windows that move on their own, and the so-called body curse. Anyone who sneaks out with a souvenir ends up taking home a streak of terrible bad luck, until they return it. Number 12. Cochise County War. In the early 1880s, Tombstone in Cochise County was a place where silver money, gambling, and whiskey walked side by side with guns and holsters. On one side were the cowboys, a group of cattle thieves used to crossing the Mexican border. On the other were the Earp family and the gambler Doc Holliday, trying to impose some sort of law. The showdown at the OK Corral in October 1881 lasted only a few seconds, but it left bodies on the ground and the whole country talking. After that came nighttime ambushes, shootings in alleyways, Morgan Earp killed from behind, and Wyatt, furious, riding across deserts hunting down everyone involved, helping cement Tombstone's reputation as a symbol of a harsh and dangerous frontier. Number 13. Billy the Kid and his vandalized grave. William H. Bonney, better known as Billy the Kid, was killed in 1881 in Fort Sumner by the bullets of Sheriff Pat Garrett, according to official records. He was only 21, but already neck-deep in shootouts, jailbreaks, and the so-called Lincoln County War, which put his name in newspapers across the country. After his death, the small cemetery became a steady stop on the Old West Trail. The headstone was broken, spray-painted, and even stolen twice before being surrounded by iron chains. Even so, plenty of locals say Garrett shot the wrong man and that Billy slipped away into the world. Do these rumors keep only the legend alive, or is there another story hiding underneath? Number 14. The Legend of the Lost Dutchman's Gold. In the middle of the Arizona desert lie the Superstition Mountains, a place that has been puzzling seasoned folks since the late 1800s. The story goes that a German man named Jacob Waltz found a gold mine there so rich it could change anyone's life, but he took the secret of its exact location to the grave. After he died, farmers, war veterans, and curious treasure hunters crossed those canyons with a map in hand, a compass in their pocket, and plenty of hope. Some never came back. Others were found dead under strange circumstances, which fueled talk of a curse. To this day, people with backpacks and metal detectors face the heat and the rocks, believing that somewhere in that dry mountain range the old Dutchman's gold is still waiting to be found. Number 15. In the saloons of the West, the sound of a cheap piano mixed with loud laughter, drunken arguments, and cards slapping on the table. Plenty of good men lost their ranch, their horse, and even their last pair of boots on a bad luck night. In the middle of all that walked Canada Bill Jones, famous for the three-card trick. He'd let a man think he was in control, and before he knew it, everything was gone. Old gamblers said Canada Bill could spot a sucker from miles away. The line attributed to him summed up the spirit of the frontier. If you don't take someone for a ride, someone will take you. In those dusty towns, a single hand could turn into a fortune, create a lifelong enemy, or send a man straight to the local cemetery. For plenty of gray-haired folks who grew up hearing frontier tales, scenes like that help explain how the country mixed the dream of getting rich quick with a constant fear of being played for a fool. Number 16. Scams and Ghost Towns. When the gold ran out or the railroad changed its route, a lot of Old West towns turned into ghost towns. Empty saloons, closed banks, nothing but dust in the street. That's when the swindler would show up claiming the mine had come back to life. He'd show a few nuggets bought far from there, some fancy letterhead, a report from some famous geologist, and sell shares in the operation as if it were a once-in-a-lifetime chance, something that would let you retire early. Plenty of people put their life savings into it. Once the money hit his pocket, the guy disappeared from the map. Since the law was days away on horseback, almost no one ever got arrested, and the town stayed empty, just with more people fooled by the promise of easy gold. In the end, it was the same old line: hurry, easy profit, and the one who paid the price was the investor who wasn't paying attention. Number 17. Cherokee Bill. Crawford Goldsby, who people came to call Cherokee Bill, was born in 1876 in a country still trying to find its footing after the Civil War. The son of a black former Buffalo soldier and a Cherokee woman, he grew up in the middle of the clashes between federal troops, white ranchers, and native nations in the region that would later become the state of Oklahoma. Still a teenager, he plunged into crime: robberies on remote ranches, attacks on trains and saloons, shootouts fueled by alcohol and debt. In just a few years, he became the kind of man whose name a sheriff didn't want to see come across the telegraph line. Arrested for murder, he was sentenced to hang. They say that with the rope already around his neck, he muttered for the executioner to stop dragging things out, like someone saying, "Let's just get this over with." He was only 20 years old. Number 18. The mysterious Thunderbird of Arizona. In 1890, two hunters crossing the desert near Tombstone, Arizona, claimed they brought down a giant creature with wings so wide they sounded like something out of an old saloon tale. The newspaper The Tombstone Epitaph reported the case and mentioned a photo showing the creature stretched out and nailed to the wall of a barn. No one ever found that image again, but plenty of people swore they remembered seeing it. From there, the theories took off. Some said it was a surviving dinosaur. Others talked about a native thunder spirit, and many believe it was just a newspaper stunt to sell more copies. Without the so-called proof, the story never died. Even today, among UFO buffs and fans of the supernatural, the same troubling question keeps coming back. If it existed, where did that picture go? Number 19. At the height of the California gold rush, a person named Charlie Parkhurst became famous as one of the best stagecoach drivers in the West. Charlie drove in any weather, handled skittish horses on bad roads, and never backed down from armed bandits. Folks saw a small, quiet, highly skilled man, and that was enough. Only after Charlie's death in 1879 came the shock. Charlie was actually a woman who had chosen to live in disguise so she could work, earn equal pay, and be taken seriously. There are even reports that she managed to vote decades before women were legally allowed anywhere near a ballot box, leaving many people today wondering how many other stories like hers stayed hidden. Number 20. During the winter of 1886-1887, a series of brutal cold fronts hit the ranchers of the Great Plains completely unprepared. Snow covered the grazing land for weeks. The cattle couldn't find food, and they collapsed from exhaustion on the ice. In just a few days, Many ranches lost almost all their animals. Reports speak of hundreds of thousands of dead cattle, which wiped out local banks, stores, and entire small towns. After that shock, ranching changed. Fences, feed silos, and barns started being seen as a matter of survival, and the old image of huge open-range cattle drives began to fade away. Number 21. Marfa Lights, a mystery in the Texas desert. Near the small town of Marfa in West Texas, lots of people swear that since the late 1800s they've seen points of light appearing out of nowhere on the horizon. They rise, drop, split apart, disappear suddenly, like someone far away is playing with a giant dimmer switch. In the 20th century, a highway and railroad were built nearby, and some researchers said the lights were just headlights or reflections. But the report started before cars and trucks even existed in that area, which makes everything stranger. Today there's even an official viewing spot by the road, where families, retired cowboys, and curious folks park their pickups at night, drink coffee from a thermos, and stare into the dark, waiting for those lights to show up again and trying to guess whether it's science, an optical trick, or something no one can explain. Number 22. The Chinese in the West. In the mid-19th century, while the United States was pushing its borders toward the Pacific, ships full of men from China were arriving in California. Many believed the old promise of Gold Mountain: work a few years, save money, and go back home. Instead, they ended up in the hardest labor crews, carving railroad tracks through snowy mountains, hanging from ropes, setting dynamite into rock that could blow if they made a single mistake. They earned less than white workers, paid for their own food, and were still told they were stealing jobs. Yet without them, the railroad linking the Atlantic to the Pacific would never have been finished so quickly. When the tracks were done, some of these workers moved on to cities like San Francisco and Seattle, opening laundries, boarding houses, and cheap restaurants that became gathering spots for miners, cowboys, and sailors. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act practically slammed the door on new immigrants and treated the ones already there as permanent suspects, a reminder that the West wasn't just adventure, it was also conflict and exclusion. Number 23. Buffalo Bill's show in Europe. At the end of the 19th century, William Frederick Buffalo Bill Cody realized that plenty of people were curious about the Old West, but almost no one had actually lived it. Instead of just telling stories, he created a traveling show with horses, blank gunfire, and staged scenes of attacks and chases. Among the performers were well-known cowboys, sharpshooters, and native leaders like Sitting Bull, presented to the audience as the great defeated enemy. When the caravan crossed the Atlantic and arrived in Europe, the show became headline news. Everyday folks and royalty alike filled the stands to see this Wild West they had only heard about. Queen Victoria herself was said to be impressed by the riders' discipline. At the same time, some observers already saw the problem. The show simplified real conflicts and turned indigenous history into quick entertainment, easy to sell and ready to circulate around the world. Number 24. During the settling of the West, a lot of outlaws insisted on being buried with the full kit: their favorite revolver, a knife, a worn-out deck of cards, sometimes even the whiskey bottle that had followed them through countless saloons. The idea was simple. If there was an afterlife, they'd arrive armed and in style. If there wasn't, at least their legend would stay alive among the living. Plenty of folks swore that touching one of those objects left in a famous outlaw's grave gave them a strange chill, like the owner was still nearby keeping watch. Over time, some cemeteries became must-stop spots for curious travelers, souvenir hunters, and history buffs. Grave robbers showed up too, hunting for original guns or gold coins, despite the stories of angry spirits coming after anyone who messed where they shouldn't. These tales spread through newspapers, bar chatter, and campfire talk, helping turn the Old West into a place where death, legend, and business still walk side by side today.